boys and girls, and welcome to the concession stand here on the KB Radio Network. I am your host, Kevin Reed, and this is the review of Peacock's original film directed by the great action director John Woo, The Killer, which is a remake, but not the remake of the Michael Fassbender film that came out on Netflix last year entitled The Killer. No, this is a remake of the 1989 film directed by, you guessed it, John Woo, which starred Chow Yun-fat. This go around, this film stars Natalie Emmanuel, Omar Sy, Sam Worthington, and Diana Silvers. And this go around, an assassin tries to make amends in an effort to restore the sight of a beautiful young singer. I was interested in seeing this film, but for a number of reasons. One is John Woo. John Woo is, I don't know how to describe John Woo other than the fact that he is, like I said before, a legendary action director. Hard Target, Broken Arrow, Face Off, which is I don't know if you can classify it as a guilty pleasure, but I really put that film high up on my love of action films. Face Off is one of those movies that, yes, if you sit down and watch it for its artistic prowess or its contributions to cinema, it's not a good film. But I love that movie. Nicolas Cage and John Travolta in that film is, I don't know, second to none. You'll never find a film with Nicolas Cage and John Travolta being at the level that they are. Nowhere in their careers. I just love that movie, and I love John Woo's direction in that film. And he directed probably the worst Mission Impossible film, Mission Impossible 2. But there are parts of that film that are excellent. All of John Woo's films, going all the way back to Hard Target, as far as his American films, not so much going into his films prior to that, like The Killer or A Better Tomorrow and stuff like that, but his American films, they're not the greatest of films, but there are parts in those films that stand out, that really define the action genre. And I just love his movies. I guess it is a guilty pleasure, but we haven't seen much from John Woo in a while. I think the last film he did was last year, Silent Night. That film where I can't think of the actor's name at the moment. I'm blanking on it, but where there's no dialogue in that film. There's no doubt. It's just action, but it's a good movie. It is actually a good movie to say there's no dialogue. It very interesting concept that I really enjoyed. So I was excited to see him back in the fold, and now we're getting another film from him. So I was all in on this. And Natalie Emmanuel, who is best known for being in the Fast and Furious films, and this is, I think, her first starring role, her starring vehicle, and she's this action star here. She's this assassin in this film. I wanted to see how she held up as well. You ever sat down and watched a film, a movie, or a television show even, and was wondering while watching the film, what am I watching? What's the point of this movie? This was it. I really sat there and struggled to get through this movie. This was probably the first John Woo film that I can really sit back and say, this was a bad movie. His other films that didn't live up to stuff, I could still make an argument to, they're rewatchable. They're watchable movies. This was borderline unwatchable. I just did not buy nothing in this movie. Nothing. I mean, there was no good takeaways from this film. Let's start with the cast. Let's start with our star here, Natalie Emmanuel. I like her. I liked her in the Fast and Furious films. As cheesy as those movies are, there are elements in those films as well that you can pick apart and say, "Oh, that was good." They are what they are. They lean into what they are. Those Fast and the Furious films aren't looking to get awards, aren't looking to get critic approval. They're just there for sheer entertainment, and that's what you get. And the actors know that, and they play along with it. And I liked her in those films, you know. Beautiful young actress. She's actually a good actor. I've seen her in other films, as well. You know, popping up in smaller roles, and she's good. She is a good actress. She was horribly miscast in this role. Horribly miscast. And you know, it hurts my heart to say that because it comes off as hate. Like I hated her in this role. I didn't hate her. You know, I think she did the best she could, as well as the other actors in this film. I think they did the best they could with what they were given. It's not their fault, you know, but she was miscast. She just didn't fit. You know, I just couldn't envision her in this role. And initially, Lupita Nyong'o was cast in this role. She was going to play this lead character, but something happened. I think the pandemic happened, and you know the schedules got conflicted, and she couldn't uh, be a part of the film, and she had to ultimately drop out. And you know, it would have been fun to see how she handled the role, but I, I don't think she could have saved it. To be honest with you, this was not a good film, and she suffered in it. Natalie Emmanuel suffered for it. Um, the two actors that I think did do the best that they could and actually elevated this film a little bit was Sam Worthington, you know, from the Avatar films and uh, countless other films. But he did a good job in this kind of villain role that he has. Omar Sy did a pretty good job in the role that he had, even though it was so cheesy. This was a clear 90s film. This film is I would say 30 years too late. Had this film came out in 1994, I think it would be gangbusters. This would be one of those movies that would have took the world by storm back then. But now in 2024, no, not so much. The action in this film, you know, is John Woo. He's known for his action, stylized, you know, the slow motion with the pigeons, all that, all the signature John Wooisms were in here, but it didn't work. You know, it's so outdated, and it feels like John Woo is stuck in the 90s. He's stuck in that style of filmmaker. His style didn't elevate. It didn't grow up. It didn't mature over time. And, you know, you would think with him taking such a long break from making films, at least here in the States, I think his last film before Silent Night that came out last year, the last film that he made was like 20 years ago, Paycheck with Ben Affleck. I think that was what, 2003, somewhere up in there. That was his last American made film. He was making films in China over that time, so it wasn't like he wasn't working. You know, he was always working, but he didn't return to the States to make films until Silent Night and this film, The Killer. But it just seems like he hasn't grown as a director, and that, that hurts me to say, man. You know, because John Woo he's just one of those dudes, bro. When you see his name attached to a film, it brings excitement. You know, it's like if you see a film that's directed by Christopher Nolan, you know it's going to be a deep film. You know, he sells the movie. It doesn't matter who stars in it. He sells the movie. Quentin Tarantino, he sells the movie. Steven Spielberg, and on and on. You know, the names that are attached as the director would sell the movie. And John Woo, for a portion of his career, was like that. It didn't matter who was in the film. If it's a John Woo film, you're going to see it. And now, not so much. It breaks my heart. Now, granted, I wasn't looking for much out of this movie. I really wasn't. And to be fair, I didn't see the 1990 what was it, 1989 film that this film is remade from. And so I was going in it blind from jump, and I had zero expectation because it went straight to Peacock, and that's not to knock Peacock on any streaming service. You know, it wasn't any consideration for this film to be released in theaters. And so I really wasn't uh, super excited for it, and I guess I got what I asked for because it was nothing exciting about this film. Um, Other than the chemistry between Natalie Emmanuel and Omar Sy, there's nothing in this movie that is exciting to watch. And this is an action movie, and I couldn't tell you any action sequence that was like, oh man, y'all need to watch The Killer for anything. You need to watch it for this scene. I can't think of one. Honestly, cannot think of one because there's none there to get excited about. Now it was good action. It wasn't like it was bad action. It was just boring, man. It was formulaic. It was paint by numbers, and you know, a typical 90s action movie that you would find at Blockbuster on a Friday night that you would take a chance on. Like, oh, I haven't, let me check this out. That's the type of film this is. It didn't move the needle for me at all, unfortunately. The Killer, which is currently on Peacock, directed by John Woo, gets a letter grade of a D plus. Yeah, it was it was hard to watch. I'm telling you, it was hard to watch this movie. um it took me a day. I had to stop and you know, 'cause I was bored. I actually fell asleep once, so I had to go back, rewind it, and find the spot that I went to sleep on and start it up again. And I fell asleep again, and I said, forget it. And I went ahead and just started it from the beginning so I can really grasp it. And it was just rough. It was a rough watch, but I got through it. I got through it, and I can honestly say I probably to be more accurate, will not be checking it out again unless there is absolutely nothing else left to watch on television. But that's just my humble opinion. I would love to know your opinion about The Killer, which is on Peacock. Did you like it? Did you love it? Or did you not watch it at all? Let me know by email, kbradiopodcast@gmail.com. You can also search for this show on all social media platforms. Just search for the KB Radio Network. Also, don't forget about YouTube. Subscribe to the KB Radio Network channel and like this video if you don't mind. Also, don't forget about the 5 stars, the reviews, and sharing this show if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, wherever you are currently listening to the concession stand here on the KB Radio Network. Everybody, thank you for joining me for this review of The Killer. I want you all to know that I love you, continue to love everyone, and until we speak again, you all be blessed.